this point, it all goes for Joseph and his brothers. His brothers were ungrateful and hated Joseph, so they got rid of him. And that is a lose. But Joseph could have been extremely ungrateful. I mean, his brothers did sell him to some stranger who then sold him again and then to an Egyptian officer. But then it says in verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph and he prospered. And I'm sure Joseph was thankful because of his obedience and faithfulness to the Lord. He had a win. Now, because of a time and the fact that Joseph's story is really long, we're going to jump ahead again, and I'll summarize a few parts of Joseph's story. And he's put in charge of Potiphar's house, and but Joseph gets falsely accused for attacking Potiphar's wife. So Joseph gets thrown in jail, where he meets the chief baker and the chief cupbearer. But what happens is, like, they end up having these dreams, and Joseph is able to interpret them for him, and eventually they get out. But Joseph just asks, please put in a good word to the Pharaoh for me, and that was their encounter there. But the cupbearer forgot about Joseph, so Joseph sits in prison for about 2 years, till Pharaoh has a dream, and he has no idea what it means. So the cupbearer remembers Joseph, refers him to the Pharaoh. Joseph is able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, which Pharaoh's dream was all about there being 7 years of good harvest and then 7 years of bad harvest. So seeing this, Pharaoh liked how well Joseph interpreted this dream and how much he trusted Joseph, that he put him in charge of his house and eventually over Egypt. Alright, so things are looking up for Joseph. Alright, they're looking pretty good. And he has a lot to be thankful for. Alright, but because of the famine, Joseph's brothers make their way up to Egypt. They come to the ruler of Egypt, and they're looking to go and buy some grain to take it back to Canaan. But when they see the ruler, they don't know it's Joseph. But Joseph instantly recognizes his brothers. And he toys with them for a while, and he sends them back and forth between Egypt and Canaan so that they can take food back. But Joseph also wanted to see his younger brother and then prove that his brothers weren't just there to spy on him. So some more time passes, and his younger brother, Joseph continues to conceal his identity and make his brothers do his will. And then in chapter 45 is when Joseph finally reveals himself. And you can read along with me here in 45 verses 1 through 5. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." And when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Now this brings us to our third win or lose. You can be bitter and lose, or you can forgive and win. Okay, now, have you ever run into that person who seems to be kind of a Debbie Downer, or they're like the Eeyore of Winnie the Pooh? It seems like every time you get around them, you just kind of get sad, and nobody's really happy about anything because they don't have anything to be happy about themselves. Well, if someone has wronged you, then it's best to forgive them, because when you trust God, that you will see the best of something. Joseph was sold twice, falsely accused, thrown into prison for 2 years, but because he trusted God and didn't remain bitter about it at all, things really turned out for him in the end. Now, Joseph could have been bitter towards his brothers, and he wasn't too nice to them when he first saw them in Egypt, but then he couldn't keep it in any longer, and he told his brothers who he was. He wasn't worried about getting them back, and he told them not to be angry or upset about what had happened in the past. And he forgave his brothers, and that became a win. So you can either be bitter and lose, or you can forgive and win. Now, another action that you can take is asking for forgiveness when you have done something wrong, but being truly sorry for it. And going the other way, you can also be forgiving to someone who has wronged you. Now, we've gone through a lot of scripture about Joseph, and we've seen how messed up his family was and how bad things got for Joseph. But we also saw all the good things that happened to Joseph. He was put in charge of Pharaoh's house, which is a huge honor, but then he got put in charge of all of Egypt. He was practically Pharaoh himself. And how much better could that get? I mean, just imagine if your parents put you in charge of the house, and then you got to make up all the rules and just do whatever you want. But it just wouldn't be fun and games. Joseph got to where he was because he trusted God. And he was also obedient in everything that he was given. So he glorified God by honoring the people around him. Now, this is our final point, and this is, and this is, part of it is, you can do this on your own and lose, or you can ask God for wisdom and win. Now, Joseph trusted God through all the bad stuff that was happening. He never complained or tried to wrong anyone. But he did as he was told, and he waited. And because of that, God chose how and when to reward Joseph. Now, all throughout the story of Joseph, the scripture says, "And the Lord was with him." And Joseph believed that the Lord was with him. Now, something you can do to show how you trust God and share how truly thankful you are is by writing a letter of everything that you are thankful for. Now, God, who's our Father, He knows what we need. And even when we ask for things, we might not always get them. But then again, it might not be about what we need or what we think that we need. And, it becomes more of what we want. Now, I love to go camping and hiking. It is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm pretty good at it. I know what to pack. I know what I need to bring in order to kind of rough it in the wilderness, make that long hike. But let's say you came on one of these hiking trips with me, and you may have been once or twice, but you kind of, you're going along with me. I know the trail, and this is kind of new to you, so you're following along, and you're kind of trusting me to take care of you through this trip. Well, as we're going along, you just might get thirsty, and then I turn to you and ask, is there anything I can get for you? What can I do for you? Can I get you something to drink? Instantly, you would just be like, yes, absolutely. I would love something to drink. I'm getting, it's hot, and I'm tired, and I could just use something to, how about a Slurpee? A Slurpee would be fantastic. You guys remember what Slurpees are, right? Okay, or sometimes they're known as ices, but basically, it's a bunch of sugar, ice, and artificial flavoring packed into one cup, and it is delicious. Alright, so you ask for the Slurpee because it would just taste so good right now, and it would just be cold, but I give you water. So I don't give you your Slurpee, but I give you some water. Now, that's not what you asked for, but it is what I gave you. Now, you may not have wanted the water, and that may have not been what you wanted. Now, you may have not wanted the water, alright, but it was definitely something you needed. Now, I've been hiking quite a few times myself, and I've been camping, and I know how this works, and I know what is needed on these kinds of trips. So I supplied you with water. And the same thing goes with our relationship with God. We tend to pray to Him for things that we think we need, but really they're just things we want. And what we need to do, if we want to see changes in our family, if we want to see the hurt begin to go away and things to get better, that we need to pray to God. And you may ask, well, I prayed, but nothing is changing. Well, that's when you have to think about, am I changing? Am I being a part of the